This is a neatly arranged pile of Land Rover parts. Not enough to do anything with, but it looks nice. We're not putting the engine back together yet. In this video, I want to cover everything that goes into getting to that point. Hardware, parts, and the most contentious and important topic in Land Rover engine building, paint colour. I don't have the block or head back yet, but we will paint the parts that I do have in the absolute correct, no debate, this is the correct opinion zone, colour. Alright, let's now talk about hardware. Most people don't want to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 reconditioning an engine only to stick it back together with rusty old hardware. So what do? Well, you can just wire brush it clean and stick it back in, and it'll look rusty in 2 days' time. Or you can reassemble the engine and then spray bomb it. To be fair, this is what most professional engine builders do, but it's not for me. And of course you could just replace the hardware. These are standard threads, 5/16 UNF in most cases. But the lengths are very specific. And in 2025 you can't get the exact lengths you need, so you're going to spend a lot of time at the grinder. And also, the original heads have a distinct pattern on them that replacement bolts don't. It'll look like you bought all of your hardware from Bunnings because you did. So what do? Well, I replated and blackened everything. All of these bolts are the ones that came out of this motor, and they all looked like this. Now, plating is a little more tricky. It's a hobby in itself, but blackening is very easy. You can definitely DIY the black hardware to look like new. And black is actually the correct finish for all of this hardware anyway. But I decided to zinc plate everything because it's a more corrosion resistant finish. The hardware from inside the engine I haven't done anything with, just a quick clean. But I have re-blackened some of the hardware from the back of the outside of the motor. These are for the clutch cover, flywheel bolts. They were a bit crusty so they needed redoing, but they're not really exposed so I didn't bother zinc plating them. This bolt is one I haven't touched. There are different processes that result in slightly different chemicals, but the gist of it is that the black you can see is like a very thin, hard oxide sponge, maybe more like honeycomb. The black oxide itself has very little corrosion resistance, basically none, but it holds oil, and it's the oil that provides the corrosion protection. And the finish will last forever, so long as it doesn't dry out. That's why I think on a motor like this, which is likely to be kept clean, black oxide isn't so good. Nobody cared about rusty bolts on their Land Rover motors in 1970, but on a nice restored vehicle, you don't want all the hardware to turn brown. And now I'm going to show you how to do both processes, zinc plating and blackening. Let's start with the easier, blackening. These have all been degreased and derusted. Most of the original black oxide finish came off, but it doesn't need to, that's not important. This process is nowhere near as sensitive as electroplating. This is the blackening solution, and all we have to do is dip this stuff in there for a while. In this case, the easiest way is going to be to throw everything into a little plastic bag. This particular blackening solution is from a company called Jane Kits in Australia, and it goes. If you're in New Zealand or Australia, that's the easiest way to get it. In North America, I would suggest Caswell. In other parts of the world, just search for it online. This bluing solution is pretty widely available now. And I'll leave everything in there for about 10 minutes. This cold blue is actually a copper plating solution. The main ingredients are copper sulfate and selenium dioxide. As soon as iron comes into contact with the solution, copper plates itself onto the iron, and at the same time selenium oxidizes the copper black. Okay, that should be done. Get most of the liquid back out. Nice black hardware. But now we're going to put oil on this, and I'm using the oil that Jane Kits recommend to use with this, which is a water-soluble oil. We need to quickly rinse the parts with clean water, just to get the blackening solution off. The reason we're using water-soluble oil is so that we don't have to dry the parts before submerging them. If you have to wait for the parts to dry, they're going to start turning brown. But you can do that. You can even dip the parts in a clear sealer like a varnish if you want to. then into this container of stinky oil. Okay. We'll just leave that to soak in for a few minutes. We do not want to drop anything in this mess. That'll do. Scoop all of this out. And leave all of this to dry. Now, as I mentioned, zinc is a little more complicated, and if you're DIYing it, a lot more time consuming. If you want to pay an electroplater to do this for you, that is a good option. It's not very expensive, so long as you do all the prep work yourself. I send stuff to the platers sometimes, and I've only ever paid their minimum, which I think is $50. But if you were to drop off a big pile of dirty, rusty bolts, you're going to pay for a lot of labour. First of all, everything needs to be completely clean and rust-free. And it doesn't matter how you achieve that, but I'll show you my process. This container is full of wax and grease remover. I just threw everything in here as it came off the motor. A quick spray with brake clean would be just as effective. I'll just go pour this on the neighbour's broccoli. Dump it all in here, probably in 2 batches. Just to shake all the loose stuff off. This is only limited usefulness, but since I have it, I may as well use it. So, whatever, you get all of the grease and dirt off that you can in a big batch. At some point in the process, you are going to have to manually clean each individual piece, either with a wire brush or blasting. It's unavoidable, so just accept your fate. And then another quick degrease. I use an alkaline cleaner in my ultrasonic cleaner, but again, you could use brake clean or whatever you want, just get the grease off. Alright, so now all of this is clean. I've just rinsed it off in water. And good to move on with the next step. Now before we plate this, we need to do 2 more things. We need to remove any remaining rust. We also need to remove the coatings. Most of these bolts have a black oxide finish on them, so we need to remove that. We're just going to use some citric acid. About that much. I recommend you use evaporust or citric acid. Evaporust is easy. You can throw everything in and forget about it until you need it. It will not remove existing zinc plating though, which you will need to do, but that's pretty easy. I'm using citric acid. It'll remove most of the rust overnight, as well as any coatings like black oxide or zinc. I'll go fill this up with water, and then we'll leave it to sit for a few hours. Citric acid is obviously an acid, so it will be dissolving the steel as well, but for a mild acid like this, it'll take a long time to have a detrimental effect on the threads or anything like that. But don't leave stuff soaking for weeks. Overnight should be more than enough. And yes, citric acid evaporust clone has been doing the rounds on YouTube. You can cut citric acid back with any base and it will work as a chelator. There's not really any reason to do this for the sake of de-rusting Land Rover hardware, but if you do want to try it, just add half as much caustic or baking soda as acid and you'll be well past neutral. Same applies to oxalic acid. Another thing you need to be aware of if you're plating high-stress hardware is hydrogen embrittlement. Now, we're not going to go into that because I don't think there's anything on a series Land Rover that you need to worry about, but I guess don't practice electroplating by doing your head bolts over and over again. And the last cleaning step is to give the parts a final wash. Oh, that noise is awful. And degrease. This is my zinc plating setup. This is the zinc bath itself. That stuff over there is for the chromate or passivating, which we will look at later. In fact, the rest of the hardware has all been done. This is all I have left. It's been a mixed up week, so I've been trying to get things done without really having time to video anything. And these are all rust free. They're looking pretty good-ish. There are a few blemishes, but we'll see how it goes. In this case, I think I'll do one bolt on each wire, but for smaller items, you'd wire them all together. Great. And yes, this is going to leave a little bare unplated patch underneath the wire, but that's okay. On some items you might have to rewire the part halfway through. Okay. I think I'll do these in 2 batches. I could probably get them all in one go. Let's do them all in one go. But first we need to dip these in acid, or pickle them. This container contains hydrochloric acid, and we're going to dip each head bolt in there for about up to 30 seconds. So not very long. This is the approximate mixture. It doesn't matter. You can use it 10-to-1 or 1-to-1. And the 35% is how it comes in the bottle. Hydrochloric acid always comes diluted in water because it turns to gas above about 50%, and that wouldn't be so useful. I would advise using this outside, but because I'm making a video, I'm going to briefly open this inside. But the vapor that comes off here is acidic, and it will stick to your tools, and tomorrow morning everything within a 2-meter radius will be rusty if you leave a lid like this off. Anyway, let's get started. So just take this off, and in it goes. Like I said, up to about half a minute is plenty in this concentration. And I'll put the lid back on there because I don't want to fume the place up. Now behind me, this is just tap water in a bucket. That's what we'll use for all the basic rinsing. And this is distilled water. So we'll take our part out of the acid, rinse it thoroughly, and then into the distilled water. It's for 2 reasons. We've just soaked the bolt in hydrochloric acid. From now on, it has to be kept submerged or it will flash rust quickly. Secondly, the distilled water is just to rinse off any contaminants from the tap water before it goes in the plating bath. All right, we'll get the rest done. Actually, what I am going to do is, where's my wire? I'm just going to run a piece of wire across the top here. Just because this aluminium can get a little bit of corrosion on it and then it doesn't conduct perfectly. And so if you're hanging up multiple pieces, you might have one piece that doesn't have a good connection and doesn't plate properly. So this copper wire is like an extra connection. And you don't have to be scared about messing this up. If something doesn't plate properly, or you realize you missed a bit of rust or whatever, you can just take the part out, dip it in hydrochloric acid, which removes zinc in seconds, and then start again. It's not a big deal. And I must have got a tiny speck of acid on my arm somewhere because I can feel it burning like crazy. But that's okay. I'm in the middle of something. I'll deal with it in a second. Okay, how does that look? Yeah, you know what? I'm going to do them in 2 batches. It would work, but I don't want the end ones to be really close to the edge, and I don't want the middle ones to be physically touching each other. I know, that's a stupid thing to say. Like, how else would they be touching each other? So we'll just take every second one out. Okay, that's a bit better. Alright, now the setup from our power supply. We have positive going to the anodes. I haven't shown you those, have I? These are the zinc anodes, 2 on each side. So they are connected to positive, and yes, I know if you've done high school science, anode is supposed to be minus, but that's not the definition of anode, okay? Negative to our parts. I'll just unplug this while we play around. Okay, so for power, this is a 5 amp power supply up to 30 volts. We don't need anywhere near that. This Just happens to be what I use for other things as well.
I always plate in current mode, priority mode, whatever it's called, with a cap at 12 volts. We won't get anywhere near that, but if there's a short or something, I don't want to unleash the full 30 volts. The rule is 1 amp per 150 square centimeters of surface. Now, don't worry about that. In fact, I only looked that up for this video. I know that nothing I can fit in this bucket needs more than 5 amps, and guesstimate backwards from there. A couple of small items, 1 amp. Half a dozen head bolts, let's say 2.5, maybe 3 amps. If you use too much current, you'll get fuzzy artifacts like tiny stalactites, and less power just means slower plating. You should see zinc forming on the copper wire within about a minute.
And let's do some plating. You'll see this drop down quickly. Yeah. I might just give it a tad more power. Yeah, they are pretty big. I think that'll be good. You'll start to see some bubbling coming off the parts. Now, in actual fact, we're not going to run it like this. I'm also using a fish tank agitator. So we'll just drop that in and turn it on. And you'll see all the solution stir up in a second. The agitation isn't necessary. I often plate without it, but it's better if you can. And we're just going to leave this for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll check the parts. Alright, it's been about 2 minutes. I don't know, I didn't time it. And now just check that all 5 of them are plating. Which they are. You probably can't see, but I can clearly see that the copper wires are turning zinc coloured, so that's good. And I'll plate these for about 45 minutes. See you then. Okay, it's been more than 45 minutes. Let's take them out and see what they look like. Oh, pretty sharp. Okay, I'll give these a quick rinse off in water and then leave them until we passivate them in the morning. Alright, we're ready for the next step. Here's the pile of zinc plated stuff. Some of it's a little discoloured, gone a little yellow, some of it a little white and fluffy. Some of the stuff has been sitting for a week now, but that's fine. You'll see in a second that's going to come right off. If you were just doing zinc plating and stopping there, you'd have to be much more careful about how the parts dry, and probably spray some lacquer or something over them too. But in our case, the finish right now doesn't really matter. So here's how this works. This large container is filled with a solution that Jane kits call Metix It. I think this is just weak nitric acid. From here, the parts, well, I'll rinse them in tap water first, then into this bucket, which is just distilled water, then into the blue passivate, and then quickly rinsed off in distilled water, and that's it, hung up to dry. And over here I have my heat gun set up in the vise. It's just pointing upwards towards where I'll be hanging the parts. Alright, let's do one of our head bolts first. This one. And it goes.
This is just a quick soak. Maybe 10 seconds if they're nice and clean straight out of plating. Some of these have a few marks on them from sitting around, so maybe 20 seconds. Something like that.
There you can see that's brightened right up. So I'll quickly dunk this in tap water. Distilled water to get all the tap water off. And into the blue. For up to about 30 seconds. That'll do. And then a quick rinse in water. And it's done. Hang this up to dry. Okay, we're all done now. I've got a wall of dangling parts. I leave them hanging over the heat gun just long enough to get the dripping water off, and from there they'll hang for about a week before we can start wrenching with them. And so that's how we get to this point. It all looks pretty good, and I think this DIY zinc plating is as durable as commercially available hardware. I fixed up this balance bike for my son back in March 2021. These axle nuts were plated by me, and they've been outside in the weather for 4 years, which I think is pretty good. Of course, zinc coating doesn't last forever, especially on a motor that gets hot and cold and driven on the beach, but the point is I don't think you're getting a lesser result using a DIY kit. Now, how on earth do I know where all of these bolts go? Well, I don't have a clue. That's why I wrote every single item down. How many of them, the thread size, which is easy because most of them are 5/16 UNF, the length in millimeters, because I only have to know the imperial length if I'm ordering new ones, and metric is superior. The part number and the page in the parts catalogue. I think you've got zero chance of just remembering where everything goes. And also, I needed to take note of any hardware that needs replacing. Otherwise, you'll forget. You won't order what you need, you'll be finishing up reassembling your engine, and then remember you need 3 new thermostat bolts and have to wait 2 weeks for them to arrive from the UK. Speaking of stuff from the UK, I have received parts. I have opened the box, but I have not pulled everything out yet, so let's do that together. Let me put this on the floor, that'll be a bit easier. Give us more room. So this is going to be most of what I need for the engine. Not the accessories, just the core engine. Okay, so what have we got to start with? Rocker shaft. Bottom gaskets. Top gaskets. Pistons. What is this? Camshaft bearings. Chain. Exhaust valve guides. Inlet valve guides. Water temp sensor. Thermostat. Bearings. Core plugs. These are from the US. Apparently they're much thicker than the ones available in the UK. I mean, they've come to me from the UK, but Turners get them from the US. A seal. A bag full of stuff. We have valves. Hopefully 8 of those. Conrod nuts. What is this? Timing chain guide. Rocker shaft bushes. I should have got more than 8 of those so I can make a mistake or two. Tappet thingy screws. We have the 2 thrust washers and a few locking tabs. And these must be the Conrod bushes, which I probably don't need. Alright, that's it. And this is most of what I need to rebuild the engine. The only things off the top of my head that are missing are the rear main seal, because Turners were out of stock. I can probably get one of those locally. The water pump, because at the time I sort of had in my mind that I might get a rebuild kit instead. And yeah, maybe a few bolts and screws and things that Turners don't sell. But this is pretty much everything for the core engine. Now I'm going to throw a lot of this back in the box because it needs to go down to the engine machinists. So the valves, the valve guides, they will do all of that, and the pistons, obviously. Now, they're not going to fit the pistons, but they'll measure the pistons and hone the cylinders to suit. I do quickly want to check the fit of these wrist pins first. I did order new bushings if we need them. Oh yeah, I think that's going to be absolutely fine. I'll take one of these and these down to the engine guys and get them to confirm that, because they are the experts.
And, in fact, we are going to change them. He felt that there was a little bit of play in them. They were completely fine to use, but since we're going for a fresh start, and I have the bushings anyway, we're just going to fit them. It's a bit of an operation because they come undersized and have to be honed to fit the wrist pins perfectly.
Well, I reckon it's about time we did some painting. Okay, first of all, the black parts. I've painted them black. I think we can move on. Now, the colour. Get your typing fingers ready. This is the correct colour. Let's work through it. If you Google search Land Rover engine colour, you'll find duck egg blue. Now here's the thing. I can't find any document or source or reference for duck egg blue? Nothing. All I can find are forum posts where expert forum posters say duck egg blue, and then other expert forum posters parrot duck egg blue, and then online sellers sell duck egg blue paint, presumably because people ask for duck egg blue because they read it on a forum. And then forum posters see sellers selling duck egg blue, and that becomes the correct colour. It is, of course, duck egg blue. You see where I'm going with this? No one can produce a piece of paper from Land Rover that says duck egg blue. So how do we know someone didn't just reckon it was duck egg blue, and that's what spread all over the internet?
Now, has this rumour resulted in people painting their engines this pasty pale duck egg colour instead of this nice bright blue?
Now this is the colour that my engine came with from the factory. I know that because I'm the guy who disassembled and painted it. Now, you're probably not going to get a good sample from an old engine, and I couldn't either. But the PTO covers were a painted engine colour, and the paint on my PTO cover was in excellent condition and matched the engine. And that was polished and scanned. So this is not from a paint code. This is a scan of a match of a really good sample of original paint. So we can end this debate now and move on. This is the correct Land Rover engine colour.
Okay, here's what I think is going on. Late 70s, Land Rover started painting these engines a brighter blue colour. If you look at them on sales sites, you'll see this colour on original 78, 79 engines. I guess there's not many of them around because most people were choosing the V8, which was an option from 79, and then the 5 main bearing engine replaced this one around 1980ish, and it was painted red and black, which is lame. This more bluey colour may have also been a regional thing. This picture is from a Rover for sale right now in New Zealand. I didn't have to look hard for an example. It also has the air cleaner on it that everyone tells me is wrong on mine. Anyway, this is the much more common colour that was used from Series 2 through into Series 3. Is it duck egg blue? Maybe. This paint supplier claims to have scanned a very good original casting, and this is the screen colour they are showing. And here's a screened version of duck egg blue. And just to point out the obvious, these colours on screen won't be accurate. They're from different sources, who knows how they were scanned. In real life, they may be identical, or even more different than they appear. People also say that the correct colour is light Admiralty grey and sky blue. And the same paint supplier also has this colour, which apparently came off a Series 3 casting, and that Land Rover switched to this in 1971. Here's my thoughts. I'm sure that in 1960, a designer from Land Rover pointed at a colour swatch and said, "Yep, this is the engine colour." It may have been a colour on a colour chart, or it may have been a sample from the paint supplier. Who knows? But someone would have chosen a colour. Now, Land Rover don't cast engine blocks, of course. There would have been a foundry supplying the castings, and the castings may have been painted by the foundry. And there would have been a paint supplier involved. So there's a supply chain all under or near the umbrella of 60s and 70s British Leyland. It's feasible that under constant threat of bigger problems, no one was that concerned if one batch of castings was closer to Admiralty grey than duck egg blue. Or maybe Land Rover did consciously decide to switch engine colours, or maybe this is all variation of what was more or less the same colour. I don't know, but
this is close enough. Yes, this is a 2K enamel that I had mixed locally to the paint code 16C33 duck egg blue. So let's do some painting. Okay, I've got some epoxy primer mixed up. Now I'm not priming most of the engine. Anything that's cast iron doesn't need priming. Cast iron takes paint really well, and I don't think it's a good thing to slather your engine in thick layers of paint. However, I do obviously need to prime this because it's steel. There are a couple of other small steel bits that will prime at the same time. And also, the other reason I'm using this black epoxy is because I'm going to be doing these other Discovery parts at the same time, and they are going underneath the vehicle. I want them black, and I want them in epoxy. Now, one extra thing I am going to do, these coolant pieces, this is where a coolant pipe attaches, they get a really hard time and corrode really badly where the hose sits. So what I'm going to do with these is just dip them in the epoxy. just like that. Actually, I just realised that I can't paint this yet. We still have to deal with this. You can see this mud shield plate that covers the oil seal is held in with rivets. We need to drill those rivets out to get the mud shield out and also the oil seal. And this oil seal is the original one because you have to remove this to change the seal, and I don't think anyone except the factory is putting rivets back in. And there we go. I'll clean this up a bit more so we can paint it, but I think I'll leave the oil seal sitting there for now because it's doing a good job of masking the hole for us. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not going to prime this because I'm not going to prime the block or the head either. I have degreased this about 100 times. There are inevitably going to be small patches of crusty stuff that I didn't manage to get off. Like that little speck there. But that's okay. At some point, you've just got to put the paint on. And if any little spots fall off or react with something underneath, then we can touch that up later. But what I am going to do is wipe phosphoric acid over this. Yeah, a brush would be better, but I've run out of throwaway brushes, so we're using a rag. You'll get over it, it's fine. You'll see this will get rid of any small amount of surface rust, but it also just prepares the steel and makes it really nice and clean and ready for paint. You can hose this off after a few minutes, but I will just wipe it down with a dry rag to get all the residue off and then put paint straight over the top. Okay. That's all ready to go. I suppose I should get some paint mixed up.
I had an audio issue here, but anyway. This is a new paint system to me. It is thick. Crazy thick. I've never seen paint this thick before. And Real Time Me said, I wonder if it'll spray through my small gun. We still have to add reducer, of course, so we'll see. This is a 2K system, so it uses a hardener that contains isocyanates. 2K paint is just generally better, but you can of course use a normal industrial enamel if you prefer. That's all I used on this motor, PPG 2.25 quick dry to be specific. Now I can see that this is too thick, but we'll give it a go as is and adjust from there next time. Typically I expect paint to have the viscosity of milk, thicker than water, but certainly thinner than cream. And as expected, it didn't spray well, more spit. But usable. Usable enough that I didn't bother doing anything about it, but next time I will thin it down more.
And there we are. It looks pretty good. I'm not sure if it looks exactly right, but it is a nice colour. The timing cover and water pump still need another coat. They're a little dusty in some of the corners. So I'll leave them masked up and I'll spray another coat over the top when I get the block and head back. But I reckon right now, let's polish this old water pump up and see how the colour compares. And if you're wondering why I didn't do this in the first place, well, I had nothing to compare it to anyway. Still pretty dirty, but quite a bit better. See if we can get it really good on the edge here. It's pretty close. Let's, I'll try and find something a little rougher. Hang on. Yeah, I mean, it's close. Any normal person that wasn't overthinking things would call that the same colour. I'm not saying that duck egg blue is conclusively the correct colour for these engines. First of all, a professional car painter who knows how to match colour properly would probably see a difference. But if I was trying to match paint by eye, I would stop here. It's the same colour. Secondly, this is a 50-year-old water pump. I think after cutting through the surface, the colour is probably how it looked when new, but maybe not. I don't know if this paint fades throughout the thickness of the paint or just on the surface. But regardless, there's no way it was ever this colour, or this colour.
Okay, so paint colour conclusion. If your motor looks blue like this one, it's probably supposed to be blue like this one. I don't have a name or code for this colour. You'll have to match a good sample. If your motor is green like this one, that's probably the colour it was supposed to be. The colour code bouncing around the internet is BS101 Sky Blue, which is obviously green, like the sky, of course. And that pretty much aligns with this paint seller in the UK. However, they state that this is the colour used from 71 onwards. Well, that's not the case, because I have two motors sitting here that are definitely later than 71 and not that colour. I think it's likely that for whatever reason, some batches of castings came painted in different colours, but overall, the majority of motors are closer to this. And if your motor looks like this, and your paint is BS16C33 Duck Egg Blue, I think you'll be happy.
And that's it. I'm just waiting on the block and the head, and then all of this can go back together. Nothing's overdue or dragging out. The machinist had to inspect everything, so that took a couple of weeks. Then ordering parts from the UK, that was 3 weeks. And now they're doing the work. So hopefully the block and head are back soon. My biggest problem right now is that my wife's CX-5 just shat its turbo. So all of this has to go away to make room for a big white sack of crap. Anyway, that's it. I can't wait to get through that nightmare and start putting Land Rover parts back together again.
And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully shortly.
Where am I going to put everything?